The storm had knocked out half the city's power, and the towering glass building of Harrington Enterprises stood in eerie darkness. Inside her office on the top floor, CEO Claire Harrington tapped her pen impatiently. She had called maintenance hours ago, and finally, the elevator dinged. In stepped Daniel, a single dad who worked nights as an electrician to provide for his little girl. His jeans were worn, his hands calloused, but his eyes carried a quiet strength. He nodded politely, toolbox in hand. "You're late," Claire snapped, used to people scrambling around her. Daniel didn't flinch. "Traffic was a mess with the storm, ma'am. I'll get this sorted right away." As he worked silently on the wires, Claire paced, muttering about an upcoming deal with French investors. The translator had cancelled at the last minute, and she worried everything would fall apart. Then, under her breath, she rehearsed a line in broken French. Daniel looked up. "Actually, it's pronounced comme ca," he said, flawlessly, in smooth Parisian French. Claire froze, stunned. "You speak French?" Daniel shrugged, returning to the wires. "Lived there for a few years. My wife was French." His voice softened, carrying the weight of loss. For the first time, Claire's hard exterior cracked. This man, this quiet electrician, wasn't who she thought. And somehow, she felt the night was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. Claire stared at Daniel as though seeing him for the first time. He wasn't just an electrician fixing the lights, there was depth in his eyes, and the way the French words rolled off his tongue carried both elegance and grief. "You said, your wife was French?" she asked, softer now. Daniel tightened a wire, then nodded. "Elise. We met in Marseille when I was studying abroad. She taught art, I was learning engineering. We had a daughter, Lila. She's 8 now." He paused, his hands steady though his voice wavered. "Elise passed 3 years ago. Since then, it's just been us." Claire's chest tightened. She had built her empire on sharp decisions and ruthless hours, but here stood a man whose strength came not from power, but from love. "You're raising her alone?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "Every late shift, every odd job, it's all for her." He glanced up, meeting her eyes with quiet dignity. "That's why I can't afford to fail." The word struck her harder than she expected. She thought of her own life, boardrooms, stock reports, endless nights in an empty penthouse. She had wealth, influence, everything people envied, yet nothing that resembled what this man carried in his heart. At that moment, the office lights flickered back on, bathing the room in a golden glow. Claire exhaled, almost relieved. But the air between them had shifted. Her phone buzzed, the French investors were arriving tomorrow. She looked at Daniel, a wild thought forming. Could he possibly be the answer to a problem that millions of dollars couldn't solve? "Daniel," she began slowly, "how would you feel about helping me with something unexpected?" Daniel blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. "Help you? With what, exactly?" Claire hesitated, a rare vulnerability slipping into her voice. "Tomorrow, I have a meeting with French investors. My translator cancelled last minute. Without one, the deal could collapse. But you could help me." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm just an electrician. You need a professional." "You're fluent," Claire pressed. "You understand not only the language but the culture. That matters more than some stranger reading lines." For a moment, Daniel thought about refusing. He didn't belong in boardrooms filled with tailored suits and million-dollar contracts. But then, he thought of Lila, her ballet shoes worn thin, the school trip he couldn't afford, the way she still whispered bonne nuit every night, just like her mother used to. "If it helps me keep the lights on for my daughter," Daniel finally said, "I'll do it." A genuine smile, small, but real, touched Claire's lips. "Good. Then it's settled." The next day arrived faster than either expected. The investors swept into the room, polished and formidable. Claire's usual confidence wavered until Daniel stepped beside her, steady as stone. As introductions began, Daniel's voice flowed in perfect French, warm and respectful, carrying every nuance with ease. The investors' stiff expressions softened almost instantly. They leaned in, nodding, even smiling. Claire glanced at him, astonished. He wasn't just translating words, he was connecting people. His humility, his sincerity, his quiet strength filled the room in ways money never could. By the time the meeting ended, the investors were not only impressed, they were charmed. Claire had secured the deal. But more than that, she realized she had found something she hadn't known she was searching for. When the investors left, the conference room filled with applause. But it wasn't for Claire. It was for Daniel, the electrician who had stood like a diplomat. Even the investors shook his hand, thanking him in French before departing. Claire turned to him, speechless. For years, she had built walls so high that no one ever stood beside her without wanting something in return. Yet here was Daniel, who had asked for nothing, who had stepped into her world and changed everything in a single afternoon. "You saved me today," she admitted quietly. Daniel shook his head. "No. You saved yourself. All I did was speak." Claire studied him, noticing the exhaustion he carried like a second skin. "What do you do after this?" she asked. He shrugged. "Pick up Lila from ballet. Make her dinner. Homework. Life doesn't pause, not even for victories." Something stirred in her chest. She had boardrooms, parties, endless nights of polished conversations. But never a reason to hurry home, never a child's laughter filling empty spaces. "Bring her here tonight," Claire said suddenly. Daniel frowned. "What? Your daughter? Bring her. I want to meet the little girl who inspires you to fight this hard." For the first time that day, Daniel hesitated. Lila was his world, his most fragile treasure. He didn't let just anyone close. But something in Claire's tone wasn't business. It was human. It was lonely. Finally, he nodded. "All right. But fair warning, she'll probably ask you 100 questions." A smile tugged at Claire's lips. "Good. I think it's about time someone did." And with that, a night none of them expected was about to begin. That evening, Daniel returned with Lila, her ballet shoes dangling from her backpack, curls bouncing as she skipped into the office. Her eyes widened at the marble floors and glittering city view. "Daddy, this place looks like a castle," she whispered. Claire, in her tailored suit, knelt down to Lila's level. "And every castle needs a princess," she said warmly. Lila giggled, instantly charmed. Within minutes, she was asking questions about the giant desk, the view, even Claire's high heels. Claire, who rarely laughed, found herself smiling more than she had in years. When Lila pulled out her worn sketchbook to show her drawings, Claire noticed how carefully Daniel watched his daughter, pride softening every line of his face. He wasn't just raising her, he was pouring every ounce of his love into her future. Later, when Lila drifted to sleep on the office couch, Daniel whispered, "Thank you. Not many people see her. Really see her." Claire's throat tightened. For so long, she had measured life in profits and deals. But here, in the quiet glow of her office, she saw something money couldn't buy: family, love, and resilience. "You've reminded me of something I forgot," Claire admitted. "That people matter more than power. That kindness leaves a bigger legacy than wealth." Daniel met her gaze, steady and sincere. "We all have light to give. Sometimes we just need someone to notice." Outside, the city still buzzed, but in that moment, the world felt still. Claire didn't just see an electrician anymore, she saw a man who carried more strength than empires, and a little girl whose laughter lit up the darkest night. And for the first time in years, Claire's jaw didn't drop in shock, it softened into hope.